Alright, so this is another unscripted video. I said last time that a different video would be me going into depth about why I'm not Christian anymore, and I feel like I should have done that before the other video, but now that I'm here, I might as well do it now. I was going to do this scripted because I don't want to get anything horribly wrong. I'm going to research after I say all this, and I will add an addendum if anything is horribly wrong. Anyway, let's just get into it. So I was Christian I got quote-unquote saved when I was 9, I think. I was in 4th grade, and I was at a summer camp called Camp Tadmor, and I was just having a blast. And it was the first time that I really got into the worship. I would standing and singing and dancing and all that. First time I had ever done any of that, and it was really fun. I still look back on those times and think, wow, that was great. I wish I could do that again. But I also look at it like there are a lot of really bad things that sort of environment breeds. Like, yeah, you're having fun with it, but it's hard to look at it objectively when you're enjoying it that much. But that's a different thing. It was fun. It was a good time. Everyone there genuinely believed. And there were kids who didn't stand up and dance, but this was a elementary school camp, so it's not like everyone was gonna stand up and dance and jump around and all that. Anyway, point is, I got saved, and it was great. I loved it. I was actually standing up in church. When I went back, I would actually sing in church, which I was one of the only youth to actually do that, along with the other kids from Camp Tadmor. Not everyone went because it was really expensive. I think it was like $200 or something like that per kid. But my brothers were too young at the time to go, so they didn't go, so it was less expensive. My parents, at least. And then when we ended up moving churches, that was a Baptist church. I went with a Baptist church, and it was really strange switching churches because I knew everyone in the other church. They were all really nice people, but it was like an old person church, So I didn't have too much trouble letting go of them, but the youth there they were cool people. I still talk to them every now and then. Like, if I see them around town, I'll talk to them and we'll have a good time. But I haven't actually specifically went out of my way to talk to any of them in a long time. But my mom did keep in touch with one specific family, specifically one who actually had kids. So we'd go over to their house every now and then, or go to the park near their house and ask them to come over, all that stuff. And we lived pretty close to them anyway. I moved recently, but that's a different thing entirely. We moved churches to an Assembly of God church called Tillamook Christian Center, and it was a great church for a while. I met a bunch of youth that were super into it. There were 3 youth teachers there, which was awesome. It was super fun, and I learned a lot. And that's where the majority of my growth, quote-unquote, as a Christian came from. I learned a lot of things that I'd never even considered while I was at the Baptist church, whether or not that was because of my age or the church itself. I don't know. But eventually we got into things like speaking in tongues and all that stuff, all the evangelical spiritual stuff. Being slain in the spirit. That was the big one. That's what made me really think, wow, this is real. I'm falling over unintentionally. And now I don't think that was unintentional. I think it was placebo more than anything. And I did actually bring this up to my friend before I had actually realized that I wasn't Christian anymore. Like, this was over a year ago, so it was way before I even considered doubting that God existed. I was like, I think being slain in the spirit and a lot of the healing that goes on is, I think it's just placebo. I don't think it's actually healing. I don't think it's actually being, quote unquote, slain in the spirit. And he told me, and this guy was my best friend. We would talk about deep subjects all the time. We were super, super close friends. This was after I had met Anthony, but Anthony and I weren't as good friends at the time. Anyway, he told me that was doubting, and that I shouldn't doubt God, and that it was God actually healing them. And I knew it wasn't. and I couldn't articulate to him that that's what I meant. I didn't say to him, no, it's not. There's no way it could be, or it's most likely not. I just said, well, I don't know. I think it is, and left it at that. And I didn't push it or anything. And this was after the whole stopping worshipping thing, but before, I think, the other kid whose dad told me to stay away from him, we got there. But that kid, we did eventually start talking again. His dad said that we could hang out, but I shouldn't, try to tell him to not worship. So that's a separate thing. I should have cleared that up last video. And then eventually, everything I'm about to tell you happened after I had moved out of my parents. So I'm still living with family because I'm, poor and I don't have a good job. Anyway, point is, I moved out and I talked to my cousin about homosexuality in the Bible, and he was saying how homosexuality is completely genetic and that it's not actually mentioned in the Bible, or if it is, it doesn't mean what you think it means. And I went in, and the only mentions of homosexuality that I could find, I think I missed one, because I have seen people talking about how horrible homosexuality is talked about in the Bible, but from the specific examples that I saw, it was all stuff like actually talking about prostitution and stuff. I can't think of any specific examples. It's been a while. But that got me questioning my faith, because I was suddenly way more open to homosexuality. I think the only example of specifically homosexuality that I could find was probably one of Paul's letters. Peter's? I don't remember. One of their letters. It was in one of the letters to one of the churches. And it was a very small thing. So, I don't know. Homosexuality is in a very bad light in the Bible. And I think that's a really bad thing. And it took me a while to realize that it was a bad thing that homosexuality is looked down upon in the Bible. But now that as soon as I realized it, everything started falling apart. I started questioning everything. So the very first thing that I questioned was, why don't Jews believe in Christianity? Why don't they believe that Christ is the Savior, right? So I looked into it. There are a lot of things like, how could Jesus be from David's line if Joseph was a descendant of David, but Joseph wasn't actually the father? Stuff like that. There's a lot, and I can't go into it all. I don't know it all. But he didn't do everything that the Messiah was prophesied to do. He didn't come back, which he said he would do in the lifetimes of some of the apostles. All that stuff. There was nothing about a resurrection in the Old Testament. And that made me really start questioning things. And at this point, I was firmly in the camp of, I'm probably not going to be a Christian soon, based on everything that I'm hearing. And then I had like this epiphany, right? I had heard somewhere before. I have no idea where. It was probably while I was street preaching. There was this one guy, and I think it was this one guy. He was a super cool guy. He was super nice, but he was an atheist, and we were, Christians street preaching or whatever. We were talking. He had this air-powered bike. He was super cool. I loved him. He was like this super environmentally conscious guy, and he was talking about his air-powered bike and how it's gonna revolutionize things. I don't remember exactly, but he was really cool. And my dad and him got into an argument about God. My dad wouldn't listen to him at all because he's so, in depth in his faith. But the guy kept trying to tell him all these inconsistencies in the Bible, like how we don't even know if Jesus was a historical guy. There are a bunch of different people who he'd linked to him. How Judaism came from a different pagan religion before it. That's what got me. I'm like, wait a second. Did Judaism come from an ancient pagan religion? Because if it did, there's no way that Jews or that religion could be like true, right? Because the entire basis of the Jewish religion is it came from everyone came from two people who knew and talked to God, and that evolved from there. but the religion stayed the same. However, if there was a different religion before it, and Judaism only existed past a certain point in human history, then there's no way that Judaism could be true. So I looked into it. Turns out it comes from an ancient Canaanite religion, ancient Canaanite polytheism. And before I continue, I don't want anyone to question their faith. That's not my goal here. If you do, and you find out something, that's great. I would love for you to learn from this. However, my goal here is not to change your faith. My goal here is to explain to you why I changed my faith. And if that changes your faith, great. If it doesn't, okay, that's fine. Anyway, so the whole coming from paganism thing, that just completely changed everything. So at this point I was firmly not a Christian, and learning all this only took 3 days-ish, right? So I went from Christian to Jewish to pagan in 3 days. And it was a weird experience. I suddenly went from having someone, specifically God, to talk to and to love and to sing about and to all this, to just having nothing, basically. I didn't know what to sing to or talk about or talk to, or, I just didn't really have much of a purpose for anything. And that was, I wasn't depressed, but I was really confused and almost scared for a large portion of that. And from there, I learned all these scientific things that meant that there is no possible way for that Canaanite religion to be true. Basically what happened, there was this Canaanite polytheistic group whose religion was very similar to the Babylonian religion, who the Bible talks down about all the time. It's great. And from that religion, there was a separatist group called Yahwists, who basically believed that the only god of theirs that should be worshipped was one called Yahweh. I believe was a volcano god, but don't quote me on that. That might be wrong. And I don't know why it was specifically them. Basically, what happened in the religion was there were 72 gods or something, and the entire world was split up among those different religions, right? So, or not religion, sorry, among those different gods, right? And Israel was given to Yahweh from El, who is conflated with Yahweh in the Bible. It's really confusing, and it's really cool to look into. It's really interesting how the religion evolved from a paganistic, polytheistic religion to a monolateral religion to a monotheistic religion. One of the first monotheistic religions, I believe. And then how that evolved into Christianity. But there were things that I'd learned that made it near impossible for that pagan religion to be true, and that's when I became agnostic. For me, it's easier to believe that a god created the universe than that there was nothing before the Big Bang and the Big Bang was the beginning. It's hard for me to comprehend that. It's hard for anyone to comprehend that. Even scientists have a hard time understanding that and comprehending it. But, it's just easier for me to believe in a god. I just don't know what god, or gods for that matter. I don't know what I believe, which is why I'm agnostic. But I do firmly believe that the Big Bang happened, that the universe is trillions of years old, that the Earth is, I don't know, is it billions of years old? I don't know well enough. But I am a lot more scientifically minded than I was, which I've always been scientifically minded, which is probably why I was able to get out of the religion so quickly. Well, 10 years isn't very quick, but after being in it for 10 years, it explains why I was able to get out of it in just a few weeks from when I left. The atmosphere I was in at my parents' house, they were good parents. I had everything I needed. I was pretty spoiled, honestly. I had a computer that I've spent way too much time on, still do. Same computer and everything. They let me spend a lot of time on my computer, just sitting in my room. I had a good time there. It was a fun place to live. There were a couple things that were annoying, like my dad would play music really loud all the time. But, other than that, it was really nice. But it almost felt oppressive in the whole belief department. I didn't even want to question you know, believing in a God while I was there. But as soon as I moved, I was able to think freely. I don't know what it was about the atmosphere there, but it was just so much easier to think when I had left. Though completely changing my belief system right after I moved from a familiar place was kind of weird. I did have someone. I was talking online with someone, and he brought up that just because Christianity, or just because Judaism did come from paganism doesn't mean that it's not true. And he brought up a bunch of points, like just because, man, he was really cool. I really liked talking to him. He brought up, like, just because paganism came before it doesn't mean Judaism inherently isn't true. Maybe the people who wrote the Bible were enlightened by a god. But then there are so many other things that people bring up every day that just completely ruins that. Like, why doesn't God talk to all of us then? If God really wants us to believe in Him, if everyone does truly, quote-unquote, believe in God, as the Bible says, then why don't so many people believe in God? There's no way there are so many people, you know, the majority of a significant portion of the world's countries just denying something that they know. Right? That just doesn't make any sense. And why is there so much proof against God if God does truly exist? Why is there so much that cannot be proven by God, or by the existence of a God? Why is there so much that goes against it? Like, why is there so much that makes no sense in the context of a 40-day, well, a big flood? I don't know why I said 40-day. It rained for 40 days, but the flood lasted a lot longer than that. Why is there so much that goes against the existence of God then? So I cannot in good conscience fully believe that Christianity is true. It just doesn't make much sense to me after everything I've learned, everything I've researched, everything really. And from my personal experience, I came to realize that personal experience doesn't denote truth, right? Like, the being slain in the spirit, the falling over when I was being prayed over, that easily could have been placebo, and I realized that before I even questioned God in general. Or being healed, like the legs being grown out. Like, you can go online, search leg grown out by God, and it's supposed to, like, fix scoliosis or something. But that's so easily done unconsciously, right? Like, I showed it to a group of kids at a fair, and they were all sitting on the bleachers like, what the heck? And they were like calling the name of God on their legs, watching them grow out with each other. And they were all freaking out. And it was, at the time, it was great to watch. It was super cool because I thought I had just, you know, brought these kids to life with God. But now, when I look back on that, in the moment, it was a fun time. But I feel like I deceived those kids. Unintentionally, of course. I was also a kid at the time. They were about my age. And I was doing it with a friend, but it just doesn't seem right. Like, and then there's the whole hell thing. That's a different thing entirely. Point is, I'm not Christian anymore. That's why. If you're not Christian after watching this, I'm sorry, but you'll get through it. I was in the same position. It's hard, I know. If you are still Christian after watching this, I would love to know how you get around the fact that Judaism wasn't a first religion, how it came from polytheism. I would love to know how you get around all the proof against God, and how all the historical inaccuracies with the Bible. I know there are Christians who believe in evolution and the old earth and all that, but there are so many more that are young earth. Evangelicals being slain in the spirit, speaking in tongues, just babbling, basically. All that stuff, which isn't even substantiated by the Bible. And it's hard for me to think that there would be a God that would do things like allow things like cancer. That's a different video entirely. Again, that's the problem of evil. I'll probably cover that next, because that one's really interesting. Anyway, thanks for watching this one. I needed to get this one out there. This one was really important. I probably should have done this one first, but whatever. You know, I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. And now that I'm not Christian, I firmly believe that there's nothing perfect out in the world, or in the universe in general. Hope you enjoyed. I enjoyed making this one. I don't know how to end this.